All right, welcome back to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Habel from Anna PD in Texas. I am really looking forward to this conversation. He's doing a lot of great things in wellness and has some unique perspectives. So, welcome to the show, Chief Habel. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Of course, how many years have you been in law enforcement total?
So this is year 30.
30. Wow,
The end of this year will be 30.
that's amazing. What did those 30 years look like for you? Why law enforcement? Maybe give us a brief little snapshot.
So when I got out of undergrad, I went to UT San Antonio for undergrad and graduated with a degree in criminal justice. At that point in time, you were kind of limited with your options. I went to work for Bexar County briefly there at juvenile detention and was looking to get out of San Antonio. Grew up there, was ready to make a move to the big city of Dallas. So started looking for jobs up here, latched on with Farmers Branch in 1995 and became a patrol officer there. Kind of worked my way up through the ranks, worked different divisions, worked child abuse, child exploitation, was able to supervise a narcotics unit, was SWAT for 15 years. So I got to do a lot of things. And that was, irreplaceable. I wouldn't give up those years for anything. Met some great people. There's some great people that are still there. But I left there in 2020 to come on board with Anna as the chief. And really, it's the best move I could have ever made. I've never looked back, and it's really been a blessing to be here and kind of grow along with the city. It's almost 5 years that I've been here now, and it's the city's been great to me, and hopefully I've been able to return something to the city as well.
Yeah, I love that. And, we were talking a little offline. At the time of this recording, we're kind of in the middle of protests and things that are going on, at least in my area. And when I asked you how your day was going, you shared a little bit of joy with me, and I really appreciated it. And I thought it was really cool. And I wanted you to share something that was cool that happened today.
Yeah, little old Anna, city of Anna, at our skate park. Tony Hawk showed up to skate at our skate park today, so I went out there and got to watch him for a few minutes, and it was funny. There was nobody out there, and after about a half hour, the crowd started building and building a little bit, but he was just out there randomly skating on a Tuesday afternoon. So
I
pretty
love
cool moment.
I love that. And it's a reminder, I think, I told you this. I'm like, I feel like the last couple days have been so heavy. And I think we all experience those things in our life where there's these ebbs and flows where sometimes everything just feels heavy and you kind of don't see the joy in things. And so when we hopped on and I was feeling that way and you were like, this really cool thing happened. And my childhood idol was out here skateboarding and I got to see him and you had this big smile on your face and it just brought me joy and made me realize that, sometimes we have to look outside of our direct situation to see those things that are around us because there's always joy, there's always things to be grateful for and excited about. So I appreciate you bringing a smile to my face today and I'm so glad that you got to see him do that. That's really cool.
Yeah, certainly was.
So 2020, you started as a new chief. We know what happened in 2020, right? And kind of in the middle of COVID. What was that experience like for you?
So it was definitely challenging. Went from we talked offline a little bit. It went from a county in Dallas County where it was mask mandates were kind of the norm. We received a lot of calls. If people were walking to their mailbox without a mask, we would get a call at the police department. And came up to Collin County, the city of Anna, and things were just very much of a different mindset. So that was a little bit of a transition. But once I settled in here, the focus became how do we stay a full service agency in the throes of COVID. Some of it we had to transfer over to phone calls. If we could answer a call over the phone, we would do so. If it was just a question, just trying to limit, our exposure. There were so many unknowns at the time. We just didn't want COVID running through the police department and us not being able to field a team. And we did have, everybody got it at one point. It was a trying time, but we were able to weather it kind of like everybody else did. We learned as we went and adjusted, and we were able to come through it. I think a better agency on the other side.
Yeah, and something that maybe people who are listening don't understand is that Anna is one of the top growing cities in the US right now. And so you've also have been trying to figure out how you can hire and how you can grow with the demands of the city. So what is that looking like for you guys? Because I know that, every organization I talk to, hiring is a challenge. I'm sure that there's growing pains involved with, having to grow with the city.
Sure. Yeah, all of the above. We're the fifth fastest growing city in the country, and there are challenges. And in DFW especially, there's a unique set of challenges in that there are so many good police departments here that pay well, and we have to figure out a way to set ourselves apart because you can't just throw your step plan and salaries on the internet and expect everybody to come flocking to you. You've
Yeah.
got to do something a little differently that gets your name out there. But it is definitely a challenging hiring environment. I've said this many times that the worst thing we can do as an agency is hire or promote the wrong person.
Mm,
And I tell every new hire that, I tell every new promotee that there's a lot riding on our faith in them. And it's important that they validate that decision in us hiring them. And I'd say, 15 years ago, I sat on an oral board in Farmers Branch, and you would see applicants come through, and you would tell them, you know what? They seem like a solid person, good background, high character person, but they don't have any life experience. So you would kind of send them back and say, go get some life experience, apply with us in a couple of years once you've been out of college for a couple of years and working, or once you've just got a little bit more life under your belt. Now we don't have that luxury because somebody else is going to scoop them up.
mm,
So we're willing to reach a little bit on life experience. We will never reach on character or integrity. If somebody has something that's a red flag in their background that points to one of those things, we will pass. But if it's a life experience issue, we will roll the dice more often than not. And so far, it's paid off for us. What we've learned is we can bring in somebody that it may be a little on the younger side than we normally would have hired, or maybe straight out of college and unproven when it comes to their work history, but we give them a chance. We train them up our way, and it's been very successful. We've had numerous people that we could point to that have been, tremendous success stories here that were historically probably a couple years shy of where we'd hired them.
yeah.
So it's worked out.
Well, I appreciate that perspective because one of the questions that popped up when you and I talked offline about this is, how do you balance hiring for numbers versus hiring the right people? And, we've had this conversation before with other leaders where, there's this conversation about how like you don't want to lower standards, but at the same time, there might have to be a little bit of flexibility that's required in order to get the numbers, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's where we have been a little bit more on the flexible side. We're not going to lower our standards. We're not going to bring in somebody that gives us concern and give them a gun and a badge and put them on the street interacting with our neighbors is what we call our citizens here in Anna. It's just too risky, and it's something that I'm not willing to put my reputation on the line for. So
Yep.
we will be a little more flexible when it comes to life experience and things of that nature, but we're not going to bend on integrity.
Right. I'm curious, what are you seeing the new younger officers that are coming into this career? What are they motivated by? Are you seeing a trend? Like, are they coming in? Because you said that it's competitive, and I've had so many conversations where everyone's kind of fighting amongst each other, and I say fighting loosely, but competing against each other for kind of the same pool of applicants. Are you seeing that people are looking for money, wellness, growth opportunities, kind of a mix of it all?
So you're definitely right that it's a small pool of applicants that you've got, a lot of different agencies figuratively fighting over, and it it's tough for a small agency in the corner of Collin County to compete with some of the bigger agencies, even in our county. And now Dallas has announced that they're hiring, 400 officers this year, and
Wow.
it's a lot to compete with. Um, what we have noticed in the younger people that we've brought on board is very, very much in favor of work-life balance.
Mhm.
That's very important to them. Schedule flexibility, getting time off, having a way to earn comp time, as opposed to overtime. They're not as money driven as it seemed to be when I got into the business. That everybody just looked at the step plan and whoever paid the most, that's who was getting the most applicants. It's just not that way anymore. I'm not saying that they don't care about money. Money always matters, but I don't think it's the number one issue that they're contemplating when they are looking at an agency. We offer on-duty workouts here. I think that is appealing to some, the ones that are more physical fitness oriented.
Mhm.
Um, we do offer some different things that come with us. Are we've had officers that are 2 years that are now switching to day shift because they've got enough seniority because we're growing so rapidly
Mhm.
that you have almost instant seniority the second you get hired on. So that's a plus. If you're playing the long game here, it's going to pay off. When we're built out in 2050, these officers that are still here are going to see a vastly different city than we are now. Right now, we're hovering around 30,000, maybe just slightly over. And the build out projections are anywhere from 150 to 200,000 people. So there's substantial growth in the pipeline. Council is really monitoring closely how they're doing that growth and trying to do it the right way. So I think the officers that are playing the long game are going to reap a lot of benefits from that when it comes, if they're wanting to promote or just do specialized divisions, it's all going to come. We're going to be a big city.
Yeah.
It just takes a little bit of patience because it's not ready just yet. And I think that is something that a lot of them are looking for. But if I had to point to their top priority, I would think it's probably work-life balance. They're really interested in having their time off, and when they get it, knowing that it's pretty safe, that they're not going to get called in very often.
Yeah. And I've heard that across the board, and there's some agencies that are trying to figure out how they can have time off for holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, how they can do sabbaticals, like different things to try to cater to that time off, because they're seeing that the younger generation is really driven by those types of things. So thank you for sharing. As you're talking, I'm thinking about the growth of your city and the growth of your agency. With that comes an increase of calls for service and even more importance of wellness and trying to be a little bit more proactive with the wellness, knowing that there's going to be this growth over time. What are some things that you did for your own personal wellness that have helped you throughout the last 30 years?
So from a personal standpoint, I've always been someone that enjoyed going to the gym. In my younger days, I was never really cardio focused. It was all about looking better or being strong or being a more effective SWAT operator. Insert whatever kind of answer there. And as you get older, you realize that longevity is an important focus. You want to enjoy the retirement a little bit, so you kind of shift it. And also you're from a a growth standpoint from the physical side. Those days are kind of behind you, so you focus on what you can control, and then a lot of that's more cardio related. So for me, I've kind of transitioned over to a more cardio based physical fitness regimen, and that's kind of helped. It's also a good stress reliever, and you feel better about yourself if you know you've worked out that day. You sleep better. It does a lot of it has a ripple effect throughout your life.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's been a lot of conversation recently about the importance of cardiovascular health, especially in the first responder profession. And I don't know if you've seen any of the stats, and I'm not going to be spot on with some of them, but from my understanding, one of the number one reasons for death in this profession is cardiovascular events. So, heart attack, cardiac arrest, and a lot of it has to do with the compounding, in cumulative stress. Nutrition has to do with it. Also, sitting for long periods of time is going to increase your risk by 147% was the stat that I saw. So I do think it's important to focus on, you know, and here's the thing. I think that a lot of people are kind of tired of hearing stats in some ways, they're like, we've heard it, we know it, but it's like, what's the next step to that? So once there's that awareness of like, we know that this profession specifically is hard on your heart, and a lot of people who retire are experiencing cardiac events, shortly thereafter retirement due to cumulative stress and, shift work and nutrition, all the things. So how can we get in front of it? How can we be a little bit more proactive to encourage that longevity? And I say this loosely, but like give your heart a break. Try to regulate your nervous system, try to lower your heart rate, your cortisol as much as you can, so that we're not so hard on your heart long term.
Sure, I think you nailed it. Between shift work and sitting for long periods, whether it be in a squad car or if you're a detective at a desk, or me, I'm at my desk most of the day,
Me too.
and sitting is the new smoking. I've heard that
Mhm.
used before. So you have to figure out a way to get people active. We do offer on-duty workouts, so 3 days a week the officers can go, whether it's detective or patrol or admin. We encourage them to work out 3 days a week on duty. We contracted with a company called First that's out of Frisco. It's local here, and they offer a variety of different wellness programs. One of which was 30-minute check-ins with a licensed therapist. So they come out to the PD, they meet with every officer, have a 30-minute meeting, and they just have the resources at the ready. And if something comes up in that conversation, whether it's work related or something at home or something involving their kids, they're able to provide some different resources or suggestions to the officers during that 30-minute meeting. Then we also had them come out and do a half day kind of nutrition and wellness resilience seminar. That was, well intended. Everybody made it to that. And then we also implemented a physical fitness assessment, which is kind of set up to be done annually, which is based on a patrol officer's demands. So
Mhm.
there's, flexibility and cardio and strength and balance, symmetry. There's a lot of different aspects to it. Then they give you a comprehensive report at the end. We in admin got an aggregate report that was kind of, a combined of everybody at the PD in one snapshot, so we could see what our weaknesses were, generally speaking. But we didn't get anybody's single report. That's provided to them as an individual. It tells you where you're strong and what you need to work on. And now we're sending officers. We just had an officer that completed last week, being a physical trainer, being a certified physical trainer. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a couple more people certified on that. We're going to make it mandatory. Everybody is going to go through, myself included, a one-on-one with the report, where that trainer can then set us up on a program that's going to focus on keeping our strong points strong, but then kind of building up those weak points to where we can, just get better as an agency. And there's a lot. Everybody's got something different that they can work on, whether it be weight loss, whether it be flexibility. I mean, flexibility. I'm a train wreck, so I've got my work cut out for me there. But as far as the goals that come along with that, there's the obvious, right? The HR type goals where you've got uh, less absenteeism, fewer sick days, professional presence in uniform. But, you know, aside from all that, we truly care about our people. We want them to live long, productive lives and walk their daughters down the aisle and play with their grandkids and live 30 years into retirement. So that's another big part of it. It's not just what we get out of it as a city. That's always been historically seen as the tangible part. The other part's tangible too, because if your people are feeling better physically, feeling better about themselves, they 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 represent you better as an agency. So that's really the goal we're focusing on and trying to work towards. It's it's a slow process because I mentioned to you in one of our previous conversations that we're not willing to use the stick. We're going to be a carrot-oriented agency, and that it's always going to be incentive-based. We're going to encourage people to do it, but not because we're going to hold their job over their head if they don't. It's always going to be something that we're trying to kind of get everyone to assimilate into the same the same priorities as the agency.
Are you finding success with that? That being more encouraging and setting the example that you're getting more of that buy-in with the carrot?
So we're still fairly early on
Yeah.
in the major heavy lifts of the process. What I'll tell you is initially what we saw is the people that work out anyway, the people that were working out on their days off or working out before or after work are the ones that were more likely to take advantage of the on-duty workouts.
Mm.
So the key for us is going to be how to incentivize or promote the workouts for people that just it hasn't been a part of their life historically.
Yeah.
So how do we get them in that mindset to where it becomes a habit? And that's where I think these individualized programs are going to be important. I can't tell you the success rate just yet because we haven't gotten to them, but I'm optimistic and hopeful. And just some of the conversations I've heard, it does sound like people are looking towards that as maybe a catalyst, something that is going to get them, okay, once I understand what I need to do here, and I know some exercises that'll be the most effective in doing that, I'm going to get in the gym. So I'm hopeful.
I think that that's always going to be the burning question, though, is, how do we get people who um, maybe need the help but aren't willing to raise their hand or maybe aren't doing anything yet? Like, how do you, because you're right, the people who are already doing stuff, like, they're going to be on board because they're used to that and there's some comfortability in it. But from my experience, there may be some people who maybe are a little overweight or haven't been in the gym for a long time, and there's a little bit of fear or embarrassment of doing things in front of other people, especially peers or leadership. And so it's like that burning question of how do we get them comfortable? How do we make that initial first step so that we can build on that over time? Because that first step is always going to be the hardest step. And I agree with you that the personalized approach is always going to be the best. If we can look at everyone and say, hey, I understand that you go to the gym and you work on your cardiovascular health and you can lift XYZ and like you have an understanding of nutrition, we might approach something a little bit differently than someone who has absolutely no idea, has never done this before, and maybe has different goals. So I think that that approach is really solid, and I'll be excited to kind of hear, in the future how that's progressing over time.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
agreed.
I'm curious to see, to know, or to get your insights on, there's lots of different pillars of wellness, and we've touched on a few of them already. But what do you think is the one pillar that is maybe overlooked?
Well, so when I started here, we had around 20 officers. And I have to give a lot of credit to the previous administration, who two of those 20 had been sent to a peer support training in Miami and spent a week or two there and gotten certified in peer support. So you had a peer support team that was in place, in a 20 officer department, which is a little ahead of the game for that time period. So we have kind of expanded on that. We've now got four with a fifth that is getting on board with that team. So I think one of the things that is overlooked in the profession is the actual implementation of the mental wellness side. We've done a good job, probably over the past decade, of talking about it and talking about it being a priority, but we haven't really backed it up with action that well. And that's just my opinion. There are agencies that are outliers that have. So I'm not saying, it's across the board, but we're now starting to see agencies walk the walk, whereas historically it was talking the talk. So it's now being backed up by actions and, budgetary considerations, and city managers and budget managers are on board with this. I had the conversation with our city manager and budget manager about this being a priority and needing to have a special line item for it. And they were very receptive, and it was funded for this past budget year, and it's going to be funded again for this budget year. So, I'm fortunate from that standpoint, but I think it's becoming more and more pervasive throughout the profession, in that people understand that there are these, it's not just the major calls
Mm.
that affect people. I was talking to just yesterday, I've got a good friend, Ruben Ramirez, that retired from Dallas PD as the assistant chief, and he started a program called Checkpoints, and it's based on making the culture check-ins. You're checking on your people as part of the culture. So it's no longer this weird moment after you have, a traumatic call that everyone knows was traumatic, whether it be a major accident or a suicide or a homicide or a bad crime scene, something just that everyone knows is bad. You get that, you're anticipating it, somebody checking in on you, and you almost get the feeling that people are kind of just checking the box that, oh, they needed to make sure I'm okay. I gave them the thumbs up and I'm okay. So this goes beyond that. And so I'm kind of talking to him about where that could fit for an agency our size. He's kind of just getting started with it. He's a relatively new retiree, but he does have some agencies on board, some bigger agencies on board that have said a lot of good things about it. So I'm interested in talking to him a lot more about that. But I think that is a big part of it. We've also partnered with Overwatch, which is a peer support program through uh, NAMI, and they have had several trainings here. We've got a guy that we hired away from NYPD that has really increased our presence in that space and has done a lot to bring us along and keep us up on, the latest training that's available, and keeping our relationships strong with some of these agencies, and having partnerships in place with surrounding agencies, to where if you have peer support that needs to, cross city boundaries. Maybe somebody's not comfortable talking to one of their peers within their department because the problem they're having is with their spouse or their kids. Well, everybody in the agency knows their spouse and their kids in a small agency like this. So you're not necessarily going to approach someone there. Maybe the outreach is to another agency. And if we've got that sort of exchange program, that's available too. We also we also have QR codes all over the department. We've got cop line magnets, which is another anonymous resource that you can scan the QR code, call an 800 number, and be on the phone almost instantly with another officer that's trained in peer support, that will never know your name, never know your agency, but is there willing to listen and provide resources that they're aware of, that the person that's making the call may not be aware of. So we're trying to put as many layers in as possible, and just make sure that we're not leaving anyone out. And because everybody's going to respond to maybe a different tact when it comes to that. So we just want to make sure that no one ever has to search very far to get help if they need it. And it's all about getting them, if, destigmatizing professional therapy, making wellness encouraged. And, we make it a point here to, you know, with the workouts, for example, we want to make sure that we don't have a supervisor going, oh man, you're leaving a short during lunch and going to work out. We're trying to make it part of the culture here. No, this is encouraged. We want people to work out. We want to steer them that direction. So I think the one of the areas that, call it a weakness, call it what you want, but I think it's just the fact that we talked about it for a long time and didn't really see it through. And I think now you're seeing agencies actually go through with it and make it a budgetary consideration, and kind of putting their money where their mouth is.
I agree. And I really appreciate the proactive approach of making wellness normal. To your point, if the only time you talk about wellness is after an event or if someone's struggling, I think that there's this idea that like maybe someone's broken or they're not fit for their job. And so if there is a culture of wellness where you're always checking in and being like, how you doing? And what's going on and investing in not just their work life, but their home life. And, there's this, like you said, this normalcy of wellness where everyone's on board and it feels like that's just a part of the day to day. So it's not like, okay, now I feel like I'm broken and someone's reaching out to me. And so I do appreciate that a lot. And I agree with you. I think that it's not a one size fits all. There's lots of different elements to it. And I think that, and I've said this before on this podcast, but I think that there's three steps to making progress, and that's awareness, education, and then action. And so I agree with you that, I think maybe previously there wasn't a lot of awareness about the challenges of mental health, and now there's more awareness. And because of the awareness, there's more education. And now I think we're in that actionary phase of how can we start to put forth resources that are actually helping and making a difference. I know that, when you and I talked offline, you have some experience, in the topic of mental wellness with some people that you've known throughout your career that have died by suicide. And I was hoping maybe you can just give some insights into what that was like and, how can maybe peers and leadership look for those signs?
And that's one of the most difficult topics to discuss because you lose peers, friends, coworkers, whether it be to suicide or just a life that's shortened by lifestyle that is almost certainly directly related to the job and what it does to your home life and maybe not having that work-life balance. So it's a terrible feeling for anyone to go through that's known someone, especially in this line of work, because it is much more common than it should be.
Yeah.
And you end up racking your brain trying to figure out what you missed or what you could have said differently or, some sort of intervention that you could have done. And in one instance, there were signs. In another instance, not so much. So it's really hard to put your finger on, what to look for. I wish I had that answer. And that's where I think it's so important, rather than trying to focus on one individual and being good enough to catch what may be subtle signs, because people are good at covering up their feelings, right? Especially cops. They're very good at putting on this brave front and this facade that tells everybody out there, hey, I'm fine. I'm doing okay. Because the fear is that if anybody thinks I'm not, well, then they're going to let me go out and patrol today.
Yeah.
So they almost feel like they're backed into a corner and have to put up that facade. So if we can reach everyone in some way from some angle by offering a menu of different options, then maybe that's how we best approach it, as opposed to trying to focus on individual signs, because I'll be the first one to tell you that they're not easy to see. So, if we can try to meet everyone where they are and let them know that there is no stigma here, and if you are faced with something, we're going to support you. There's two types of people in the world, right? I mean, there's some of these young folks, they're 22, 23 years old, and they haven't really been kicked in the gut by life yet. But the two types are people that have been kicked in the gut and people that are going to be kicked in the gut. It's going to happen. So
Yeah.
if they see that and they're like, well, why is so and so, getting this paid time off? And the answer is, we're all going to face it at some point, and wouldn't you want the agency to have your back when it's your turn? So, even though we're having to pick up the slack for people that, at moments, it's important that everybody realize that it's a team effort and you never know when it's going to be you in that situation. So I do think that trying to trying to reach everyone at least is what my answer would be. Because I'm not an expert in noticing the signs in an individual. And you may see a little sign and somebody else may see a little sign and then a third person may see a little sign. But unless you get together and discuss it, which doesn't happen commonly, you're not going to put the pieces together to know until sometimes it's too late. So I do think just keeping the resources and the layers in place, letting people know that there is not going to be a stigma associated with any sort of help that's needed. We're going to not only have it there for you, but we're going to promote it every chance we get. That is the approach that we're taking, and I hope that it's effective. If I'm always willing to listen to others and other successes that they've had, and if there's a better way to do it, we'll change on the fly. But um, that's kind of the process that we've put in place. And like I said, this former NYPD officer that's really taken on the kind of the brunt of what we're trying to do here. He's done a phenomenal job, and I can't take credit for most of what we've done here. Most of what we've done here is me hearing his good ideas or others' good ideas that have come to me and just saying yes. So that's all I can take credit for is being able to say yes to a good idea. But there have been some that are very effective and things that we want to keep in place and build on. So a lot of credit goes to just individuals that are comfortable enough and you want to create an environment where they can poke their head in the office and say, "Hey, I've got an idea," and not feel like they're going to get shut down every chance that they that occurs. So
Thank you.
if that answered your question,
It did
I
answer my
okay.
question. Yeah, thank you. What words of advice would you give someone who is earlier in their career in the context of wellness? Maybe something that you wish you would have known that would have helped you out earlier in your career, or something that you've learned along the way.
Sure. So one thing that I've in over the years in seeing who was able to there's always going to be ebbs and flows in this business and there's always going to be highs and lows and it can be a roller coaster ride at times. The people that were able to stay kind of even keel and not get on that emotional roller coaster, to use a Gil Martin term, it's those are the people that have really been able to stay grounded and have the more successful sort of personal life outside the career. When you come in and you think you're going to change the world at 22 and you think you're going to rid the world of drugs and bad guys, and you realize really quickly that that's not going to happen, right? You're trying to empty the ocean with a teacup. It's just not going to happen. So you have to find comfort in your small victories and throughout your career, you're going to have some big ones too. But don't get discouraged and down when maybe the person bonds out or the rest of the system isn't working, in your opinion, as hard as you are to put the bad guys behind bars and keep them there.
Mm.
It's the system has flaws. You do what you can within that system and don't take it personally when it doesn't work out exactly the way you think it should have, because more often than not, it doesn't. So if you can avoid that, you can avoid some of the aspects of burnout that go along with that. There's always going to be things that jump up and bite you throughout their career. And, as far as getting into a rut, an individual is the only person that can get themselves out of a rut. Hopefully they have peers that they can talk to, resources available. But when it comes down to it, if somebody wants to stay in a rut, they're going to stay there. And there's no amount of counseling or therapy or peer support or administrative support that's going to get them out of it if they don't want to leave that spot. So they have to be willing to meet us halfway and, you know, try to find their way back. Um, but yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is don't try to change the world and don't expect to to be able to because you're going to face disappointments if that's the case.
Thank you. I really like the concept of staying level, and that's something that I have learned in my old age of, trying. And so there's, talks about this in Stoicism, but I heard this really, really good definition of resiliency. And they said that the definition of resiliency is how quickly you can get back to baseline. And so if you think of this straight line as your baseline, if you have something where you get really excited, how quickly can you get back down? Or if you get really depressed, how quickly can you come back up? And so it's this concept of the quicker you can get back to that baseline, that levelness, then that's the longevity, that's the resiliency. Because it's hard when you're going up and you're going down and you can't even yourself out and realize that it's in this that creates the longevity. This is going to create I don't know what word I want to think of, chaos in your life.
Couldn't agree more. And one of the books that we encourage people to read is by Kevin Gilmartin, and it talks about the emotional roller coaster. And law enforcement, it should be mandatory reading for all law enforcement because there's a light bulb that goes on when you're reading it, and it helps you understand why you're feeling the things you're feeling after certain calls, or why when you hit the house you feel completely exhausted and don't want to make a decision. So it should be mandatory reading for law enforcement, and it really is a different way of saying kind of what you just said, find your way back to baseline. So I couldn't agree more.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate your time so much. Thank you for coming on here. That's all I have for you, but I want to give you the opportunity to take the floor if I missed anything. Otherwise, that's all I've got. So.
No, I don't think so. I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity in the forum.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you and your time, and I'm really looking forward to hearing, how things go over time. I know you guys are growing quickly, and you're adding a lot of new resources, so we'll definitely have to keep in touch.
Sounds good.
Thank you.